I see, guys. So eventually, you have to understand that if you want to do better, you have to really speak out every single day. The more you speak out, the better for you. So you have to realize that you have to read daily, you have to grow as a person, and you have to fulfill your needs. Do you understand? So every single day is going to be different. But I find that my best work that I ever achieved in my life was what I uploaded online in terms of all my content every single day that I upload. For example, I find exquisite manners in terms of exquisite ways of living. And what does that mean? I realize it means information. So I find information in a way of life where I live out of what I see. So what I experience in my life, I say that to people. And now you have to understand that if you have embarrassing jokes about you, like for example, embarrassing things that you've done in life, then it's always better to encourage yourself to expose all of your fears and all of your, let's say, life. Because you have to understand you only live once, and if people laugh at you, that's their problem and it's not your problem. You have to understand that everyone's, let's say, done something wrong in life and everyone's done something right in life. But everyone's done what is in life. Do you understand? So if you really, really expect yourself to grow as a person, then you have to realize that you have to achieve more. But finally, I'm thankful that I uploaded all my audio programs up on to YouTube at the moment. And now I'm ready to start doing my quotes. I'm ready to do other things in terms of life where I can communicate my feelings, where I can help myself to do better in all walks of life for myself. So finally, I'm ready to have a new chapter in my life where I can expose myself much more, where I can do things according to how I want to do it. And for example, I need to actually live life to the fullest every single day as much as possible to really, really encounter my dreams, to have a specific way of living for myself where I can live and breathe at the same time, where I can do things out of accordance and I can really, really help myself to do things in accordance as well. And you have to understand that speaking words is outside the box. So the more you speak words every single day, the more you can encounter visions that come true for yourself. So you have to understand that words lead the way. So you have to be in alignment with your words. Do you understand? So what you say goes. Do you understand? But the thing is that it's not always like that. You have to understand that you have to read a lot. And when you read a lot, then what happens is you get smarter as a person. Do you understand? You have to be constantly reading. You have to be constantly thriving to become someone in your life every single day where you can actually expose yourself to the fullest every single day, where you can do things for yourself that you wouldn't otherwise do. And you have to go for a walk here and there just so that you can pass by time, relax in the moment, go in nature every single day. Make sure that you're reading and writing more and more, and that way you learn to communicate on a daily basis even more. So that's what you need to do every single day, and that's how you get forward. You understand? So it's more how every single day is going to be a different day, and you have to do things different every single day. You have to change as a person. Do you understand? But that's what everyone does in life. That's what you need to stand for. You have to stand for the difference in you. Yes, and you have to do something different to help the people to succeed and to market yourself every single day to make sure that you can do the most you can. That's all I'm saying. So guys, I just learned something, for example, that if you want to improve your speech, you have to talk. You know, so if when you talk as a person, for example, you talk anything in life, you say anything that you want to say, because it's freedom of speech. You know what I'm saying? You have the right, you have the complete right to talk about whatever you want, whenever you want. Do you understand? But sometimes people won't allow you, for example, to talk about what you want to talk about. So what you do is you leave people out of it. Do you understand? So for example, if your mother doesn't want you to talk about her on social media, then respect her wishes. Do you understand? Make sure you respect her wishes and don't talk about her. Yes, and talk about something different. Talk about people overall, so that people understand in overall sense about what you're talking about. But the thing that I realized recently is that the more you speak, the better your focus. So you have to understand that this, in terms of what I do now, This is for me a concentration technique. And what that means is it's my ability to improve my speech capacity. So, for example, when I go out there and I speak in front of crowds, or I speak in front of you, for example, in my audio program right here, what I learn is that I'm improving my focus, I'm improving my concentration as I go along, for example. And that's a good thing. So, you have to understand that the ability to focus in terms of what you want to say in life, and the more you have to understand that you go a certain direction in life, and when you talk in that certain direction that you want to talk in, you're going to build focus and concentration because you're talking. You understand? And the more you talk in terms of life, the better your concentration and the better you organize your mind and the better you organize everything in your life. And that's why I do life coaching, for example, because it helps me to express myself. And the more I express myself in daily life, the more I can focus, the more I can concentrate, the more I can do things. You know, so that's what I always do in my life. So you have to understand that there are always going to be people out there who are going to, let's say, do something in life to help prevent something in life. So you have to understand that there are people out there who want to prevent you from growing. They want to prevent you from living a great life. Do you understand? There are people like that. Do you understand? But the thing is that also you have to understand that nobody's against you at the same time. So you have to realize that, for example, there are people in my life right now, and there are people probably out there watching me right now in terms of what I'm doing in my life, what I'm saying, what I'm doing in terms of life coaching and music and stuff like that. But they can do whatever they want. I don't do anything other than making sure that I grow. Do you understand? So you have to understand, I mind my own business. Do you understand? I mind my own business, and I talk to people who want to talk to me. Do you understand? So, for example, you have to realize that friendship, for example, is something that happens when it's just natural. You understand? Friendship happens naturally. So if someone doesn't want to reply to you, it's because either something you did to them, or either something you said to them, or something that you pronounced in the world around you, and you talked maybe bad about them, or maybe you talked good about them, and it didn't work out, or something like that. And you have to realize that you have to grow yourself either way. So you have to do things to understand that you have to grow yourself regardless of the situation. You understand? But I have a daddy long legs over here. I have this spider right now, right next to me. And the thing is, it's in its web, and I understand that that kind of spider is actually harmless. But the thing is that while I'm sleeping, it may creep up on me. So I have to make sure that I have to somehow get a stick or something like that and make sure that I can somehow remove it from the situation somehow without trying to kill it, for example. So the thing is that I'm not worried, but the thing is you have to realize something. You have to realize that silence improves concentration. So the more you listen to silence between the gaps and between your words and everything like that, you're going to always be improving your concentration. The more you live life, the more your concentration grows. You understand? But it just depends on what you do. If you listen to silence, you're going to have better concentration and you're going to have better focus. And also, if you're listening to music, it's going to make you happy. And when you're happy, your brain is functioning at a better length. It's actually producing much more dopamine and stuff like that, which helps you to focus. You know, so for example, when I was doing methamphetamine before, do you know how much dopamine was coming out of my brain? And you have to realize that because so much dopamine and endorphins were coming out of my brain and just splashing all over my brain, I was much more in a focused state. I was much more present. Do you understand? I was much more, let's say, in the moment. Do you understand? I was much more aware. I was so aware on the methamphetamine. But I don't take methamphetamine anymore because I don't need it to live life. Do you understand? So make sure you stay off the drugs, because drugs make you to lose focus and concentration. But also you have to understand that it's not good for your health. So you have to realize that drugs also helps to improve your concentration and focus. Do you understand? But eventually what happens is it's very bad for your health. It's very bad for your body. And even though it helps you to improve your concentration and focus, it's very bad for your health regardless. So for example, if someone takes drugs, what's going to happen is they're going to be much more aware and they're going to be much more focused. You understand? And there's drug and performing enhancing drugs, for example. And these people become much more aware. They become much more functional, for example, for the short term. You understand? They have short term, for example, focus, and they have short term concentration and stuff like that in the short term. But long term, when you think about it long term, when people do drugs long term, what happens is they start to deteriorate. They start to become less of themselves. They start to lose their brain cells. They start to lose who they are, for example. So you have to understand that in my life, you have to realize that I went through a difficult path in my life. And the reason I went through a difficult path in my life was because I was doing drugs. Yes, I was doing drugs. And how does that help you? It just helps you to understand what I was doing. You understand? And there's something that I want to explain, that you have to realize that not everything that you say is going to help people, but the thing is that everything that you say is going to help people in a different manner. You understand? So you have to realize that, coming back to drugs, for example, I took drugs, you understand? And there was a time in my life where I wasn't as focused. I wasn't as communicative. I wasn't as spiritual as I am today. For example, I was much more immature, and I wasn't at a much more professional level in terms of communication, in terms of acting, in terms of the person that I want to be. For example, I made mistakes. For example, I caused violence in front of people. You understand? I hit people, for example, for no reason. You understand? Stupid reasons. And you have to realize that if you want to help yourself to explore, for example, if you want to help yourself to explore something to be positive about life scenarios, you have to grow yourself regardless of the situation. So you have to really, really dig deep every single day, and you have to really, really find yourself pronunciating yourself much more about life. You understand? You have to really dedicate your dreams. You have to dedicate yourself to something. So by me talking to you right now, what happens, there are these benefits that I get from the audio program that I'm giving you today. I'm building my focus. I'm building concentration. I'm building a healthier state of mind. I'm building positivity in my life. I'm sorting out thoughts. For example, I'm planning, organizing my life around. I'm also developing a happiness for myself, and I'm making sure that I'm doing much better in my life regardless of the situation. So I'm making sure that I'm always much more reflective about what I say and what I do, but I conduct myself in a professional manner every single day, and I do things in according to the things that I need to do, for example. So the reason I do life coaching is because it just helps me grow. It helps me as a person to express myself. And because I express myself so much in daily life, whether it be in my journal or in my quotes, for example, I realize things that other people don't realize. I go in the spiritual dimension somewhere. I make sure that I explain myself in the best kind of way, and people can understand what I do for a living and what I do for my work, for example, which is helping other people. You understand? And do I make money on it? I do make money on it. You understand? I make focus, I make concentration, I make happiness from it. I do things for myself in terms of life, where I'm actually helping other people in terms of all ways. I'm learning to develop myself in the best kind of manner forward, and I'm understanding that my manner in terms of what I'm doing is much more positive and reflective. Do you understand? I have to be a reflective person. I have to make sure that I'm living a life grateful, in terms of that I'm living a grateful life all the time, and I'm always grateful for everything that I have today, because I understand that there are people out there in worse positions than me. I understand that there are people out there that don't have a mother, that don't have a father. They're either in prison, or they're just born today, for example, or either people out there, for example, that have died earlier than me, or don't have as much as me, for example. And you have to realize that there are those kind of people out there. You understand? So there is always going to be someone out there who has more than you in some aspect of life. Do you understand? So you just have to learn to accept that, and and you have to learn to understand that you have something more than them in some kind of way. And all I'm saying is for you personally to start really talking as much as possible every single day. Try to talk as much as possible, regardless of what your parents say about you. You have to realize that there have been people out there who have told me, hey, Danny, you don't make sense. You don't make sense in the way you talk. You don't make sense in the way you function. You have problems, Danny. I mean, I've heard it from other people, do you understand? And I've heard also, like, for example, other people calling me sick, that I'm sick and stuff like that. I'm not sick at all, but also I am sick at the same time. But the thing is, you have to realize that everything is the truth in life. You understand? Everything in terms of words and what's said in life is true. You understand? So there are people out there, for example, that live a Mediterranean diet. They live a Mediterranean diet. There's a diet out there, for example, that you can go on a meat diet only and just eat meat all day long. For example, there are other people who are vegans. There are other people who are vegetarians. There are other people who are flexitarians. Yes, and there are other people who eat certain meat but don't eat certain other meat. Yes, and you just have to choose your own way. Do you understand? So, for example, you have to realize another thing about me is I kept on going back on my word. Do you understand? So, for example, I say something, I'm gonna do something, I do it, and then I go back on my word. Do you understand? For some reason. You understand? And that's not something that's really growing you. Do you understand? So if you say something, make sure you're doing it. Yes, and that's all I'm saying. Try never to go back on your word, is what I'm saying. Try to say something and do it, and just make sure you stay still. You understand? So you have to realize that other people want you to change, but they don't never want to change themselves. You understand? So there are people out there who always want you to change, but never want themselves to change. You understand? And life is unfair like that. You understand? They want you to change, but they don't want to change themselves. So you have to realize that the reason I do everything that I do is because I help as much as I can in terms of what I can do. And if the universe wants to put me in jail for what I've done or whatever I've done in my life or whatever that means, for example, you have to realize that I've done nothing wrong in life. I've only given as much as I could. For example, I've received from the universe what I could, and I understand that I deserve much more. Yes, and so you have to realize that everything I've done for until now has been good. I've hurt nobody by my decency, and you have to realize that it's much more how I never killed anyone. I did hurt people before in terms of physically, but I don't do that anymore. So the thing is that you have to realize I'm in a better mental frame now than I ever was. You understand? I'm in a better mental frame right now than I ever was. So what I find also is that when I'm alone, I'm the best alone. I'm the best when I'm alone, because you have to realize when you're alone, nobody's screaming at you, for example. Nobody's talking to you except you, for example. And you have to realize that you have a daily conversation with yourself, obviously. I mean, everyone has a daily conversation with themselves. Like, for example, with myself, when I have a daily conversation with myself, I go in my journal and I speak with myself to go and plan. I speak about things just like I do with you right now over here. So what I do is I strategize my life. I reflect on my life. I tell you, hey, this is what I've done today. This is what I've done today. And I'm always speaking to other people. Do you understand? But when I talk to myself, it's like, Danny, I ask myself, Danny, what are you going to do today? Are you going to plan something today? For example, how are you going to succeed, Danny, today? For example, I ask myself questions. I speak with myself in terms of ways that I can improve, for example. And you have to realize that there's nothing wrong with that, you understand? But maybe someone else may think that there's something wrong with me speaking with myself about my life and about self-reflecting with myself, you understand? But the thing is that also what I do is I ask other people in terms of life, how can I do this? How can I do that? How can I do that? Yes, and it's not like that I go by my own opinion all the time. Yes, and I go and read from other people as much as I can. Every single day I read as much as I can, because reading helps you to build cognitive skills. It helps you to build motor skills, and it helps your attention span and everything like that. It helps your creativity, for example. And you have to realize that, for example, when you are reading out aloud, so this is what I tried today as well, and I read out aloud. You understand? I read out aloud, and I was reading out loud, and I noticed that my brain needs to be faster. Yes, I have to be faster in reading, for example, out aloud. Yes, and so that's what I'm practicing now. I'm practicing to read out aloud as much as I can, because sometimes when I read, I skip a word, and I try to add my own words into that sentence, and then I go back and I read again, for example. But I need to be at a better functioning state, for example, with my reading skills when I read out aloud, for example. So everyone needs to be really fast at reading out aloud, and that way you improve another ability, for example, for yourself to be much more better with your memory and creativity and stuff like that. So you have to realize that if you want to do better, you have to always boost your creativity, you have to boost your cognitive skills, you have to boost your brain function. You have to realize that if you just listen to silence, if you listen to silence more often, you will improve everything about your life. Yes, and it's just that simple. So you have to realize that silence is the key to every answer that you ever want in life. So you have to realize that if you want to do better in all walks of life, listen to silence. You understand? Because silence will give you the answer. So for example, around other people, make sure that you talk when you need to talk. And when you don't feel like talking, make sure you go somewhere alone in your room somewhere, and make sure you be alone with yourself if you don't feel like talking to other people. And just go and just write down your thoughts as much as possible. Yes, and write as much as possible, do as much as possible in terms of words. Yes, and it's going to help you to function better, and it's going to help you to live a better life. Yes, and that's what you need in your life. You need a positive life. You need to develop yourself in other ways. And my voice has gone deeper, if you didn't realize as well. Yes, and so the thing is that I have this massive problem. And it's not a problem for me. It's not a problem for me, but it's a problem for other people, for example. And you have to understand that other people have been telling me, hey, Danny, you have 2 likes on YouTube. You have 3 likes on your YouTube account. You have 2 views on your YouTube videos. For example, you have to realize that I haven't been marketing my YouTube channel much. So that's why I'm going to make sure that when I create my CD album, I'm going to go and give out as many CDs as I can. But I'm going to sell it. For example, I'm going to sell my CD album for about $10 per CD or something like that. And I'm going to realize that once I do that for myself, I'm going to give out my business card as much as possible. Yes, I'm just going to give out my business card, play my music on the street, be around people and stuff like that. It's going to be a new experience, and I'm excited for it, for example, and I'm just going to try to sell as much as I can, for example. So what am I selling? I'm selling jazz music, for example. Selling jazz music. I like jazz music. I like to listen to music, for example, because it lifts me up. For example, it lifts me in ways that other people don't lift me up, for example. So you have to realize that when I listen to a nice jazz song or rock song, for example, that's really quiet in its ways, that is just relaxing. It's not too loud, and it's not, let's say, too soft. Yes, and it's just in the middle somewhere. I mean, it's just like, it's upbeat, but at the same time, it's not fully upbeat. It's not like fully going, but it's not too slow. Yes, and so that kind of music really gets my pace going. Yes, and so that's the kind of music I create as well. But I've been trying to also just really started now to create film music. So anything like a composition for a film, yes, and something like that, so that I can help myself to just open up a broad aspect of life about what I can do in that kind of scenario for myself. Yes, and because it's a different genre and it's a different aspect of life, and that's why I'm trying something new for myself, to create movie scenarios of music, or something, some kind of composition, some kind of scary music kind of thing going, or we practice with sounds and that I can listen to and stuff like that, and just develop myself, and maybe sell that kind of CD out there in the market sometime, for example, and just help myself to do a better way of life and stuff like that. But it's different. I realize everything's different in my life. I realize now I'm going to go to Australia very soon, so I'm going to go visit my dad, for example. And you have to realize that I understand that it's going to be a new time in my life. I realize things are going to be different. And you have to realize that, for example, some people don't like for you to expose their life. Yes, and so if they tell you, hey, Danny, please don't expose, I mean, if they say, your name and they say, hey, please don't expose my life on YouTube. Don't expose my whole life on YouTube. Don't expose anything about me in life. You know, saying, I mean, just keep their wishes. You know, saying, make sure that you don't go causing problems, exposing people's lives. You understand? So that's what I had. That's the kind of thing that I do. For example, sometimes where I may say something about a person that's the truth. I mean, it's the truth about that person. And sometimes you have to realize that it's just what I see for myself. Yes, and I wouldn't otherwise talk bad about them or anything like that. It's just that it just comes off in a way that I say what I see, and that's it. And that's just my perspective. But the thing is that when I talk about people, I talk about them in a contradicting manner. Yes, and so I talk about what's good about them, I talk about what's bad about them. Yes, and that's the thing. And like, it's not that anything's bad or good about them. It's just that it comes off that way. Do you understand? It just comes off that, hey, it's like Danny's talking shit. Do you understand? Kind of thing. And I'm not talking shit, but the thing is that I'm talking things, just meaningless things about everything. Do you understand? And you have to realize that someone just came into my life and said, hey, please don't talk about me on YouTube, for example. So I'm keeping their wishes. Do you understand? I never want to expose who they are anymore, and I just want to go my own way. Yes, and the same thing goes, like, for example, when you're recording someone. Yes, and just make sure that you don't record them without their permission, for example, because you never know if that person wants to be exposed or not. Yes, and everyone's different. Yes, and I realize if you record me, for example, I realize if you're recording me right now and you post it somewhere on YouTube or somewhere else, I don't mind. I don't care that if you go and record my voice, or if you take my content and make it yours or something like that, or if you try to record me in a phone conversation without my permission. Yeah, I have nothing to hide. But people that don't want to be exposed about their life have a lot to hide. Yes, and they're hiding a lot of who they are. Yes, and that's why they cause problems. They cause you problems when you keep exposing their life. Yes, and the more you expose their life, the more you can separate from those people. Yes, and or they just don't want to talk to you anymore because you're just exposing them. Yes, and so it can ruin relationships. Yes, and so the thing is that if you're gonna record someone, make sure you ask for their permission, and make sure that you understand to respect other people like that. You understand? So that's what I've learned. You understand that not everyone wants to be exposed. You understand? Not everyone wants to be talked about. You understand? So if you want to talk, then talk about it in an overall sense. So talk about, this is what people are, this is what people do. Yes, and these are certain people like this that do these kinds of things, and because they do these kinds of things, this is what you can do about it. Yes, and so you just teach people. For example, you teach as much as you can, and that's what I do on a daily basis. As much as I can, I try to teach. I try to teach because it helps me to function. Yes, and it helps me function in a better state of mind, because when I do things, for example, when I can go and help myself to grow in terms of different ways, I understand something that I can grow with. Yes, and I live my life the best way I can. But the thing is that you have to realize that you need to go and help yourself to understand that there are people out there that mean good for you. Yes, and there are also people that don't want you to succeed as much as they don't want you to succeed more than them. So if you come off across to other people in a way that you're more successful than them, then they're going to despise you in some kind of way. Yes, and they're going to start despising you. So try to always be equal with other people. Yes, and try to always be equal, and not above the herd, but not below the herd. Try to be somewhere in the middle. Yes, and try to be somewhere in the middle in all walks of life. Yes, and because that's the ultimate way of life. So there are of course richer people out there and stuff like that. There are poorer people out there, but I've been taught in my life to be somewhere in the middle. But it doesn't have to be. Yes, I don't have to be somewhere in the middle all the time. Or else I can be rich. I can be richer, but I never want to be poorer. Yes, I never want to be poorer in my life. I want to be richer. Yes, and so make sure you understand that if you're gonna help yourself, try to get as rich as possible in life. Try to be as rich as a person that you can be. In a sense, because that's going to help you in the long run to do better in terms of all walks of life. So you have to realize that what's enough is enough, and you have to realize that if you want to do better in all walks of life, you have to talk as much words as you can every single day. Try to help as much people as possible every single day, and that way you can give something. You understand? Because your thoughts help people. You understand? No matter how much thoughts you gave. For example, I gave so much thoughts. I mean, those thoughts are out there in the universe. You understand? And the thing is that when I expose everything about myself, I'm free. You understand? I'm free to live my life. You understand? There's nothing that I didn't expose in my life. You understand? There is nothing that the universe doesn't know about me now. You understand? Everything's on the internet for me. Because I expose my total being of who I am, I'm in the spotlight, exactly how I am. And guess what? Apparently the universe accepts me for who I am. You understand? And that's it. Apparently, what are you hiding? I mean, why are you hiding yourself from people? Why do you want a private life? For example, why don't you expose yourself in terms of everything that you are every single day? The more you expose yourself, the better you make sense. You understand? So you have to realize that I've had people come up to me and say, "Hey, Danny, you make no sense." You understand? I make no sense. But for me, I make sense. You understand? For me, I do make sense. In my life, I make sense because they don't understand my spirituality. They don't understand my words. They don't understand what I'm really trying to say, for example. You understand? But they're not concentrating. You understand? So the thing is that you have to realize that if you really want to understand me, then you have to read all my content to understand me. You understand? If you just pick out one video, for example, of my content, and you just try to understand that video, maybe if you're smart enough, you can. You understand? But the thing is that I'm not the smartest person in the world. I'm not the most stupidest in the world. But I will say that I'm stupid. Yeah, I'm very stupid. I'm a very stupid person. You understand? And the reason for that is because I know nothing. I know nothing about what I say. I know nothing about what I do. I'm here to just express myself, to just really give as much as I can for myself to grow, and that's it. You understand? And you have to realize that anything that I say that goes in my life, for example, that I can express, helps someone out there in some kind of way. It helps them to give, it helps them in other ways. You understand? So I can give my words, I can give who I am in terms of my words. You understand? So you have to realize that when you give a perspective to people, you help people like that. You understand? So there are people out there listening to this, for example, and they're giving me medication. You understand? And I think they are listening, but the thing is, you have to realize that even if they are listening, I'm not hiding anything. You understand? So you have to realize that when you are exposing yourself and a psychiatrist is evaluating you and they go on your YouTube account, for example, to see how your mental health is, you understand? I'm in that kind of situation, you understand? But you have to realize that maybe they're going on my YouTube account or maybe they're not going on my YouTube account. But the thing is that it doesn't matter. You understand? I'm expressing who I am, you understand? So you have to realize that when I express myself, I'm just going all out as much as I possibly can, you understand? But you have to realize that when you talk spirituality, I'm pretty sure most people will never understand what you mean. Yes, and for example, that if you want to express yourself, for example, you have to explain exactly who you are. Yes, and in terms of your core being. And now I've been taught by other people, for example, that we are not of this world. You understand that we are something much better than this world. You understand? So I hold on to that. For example, I believe that to be true. Yes, and that's my personal opinion. And everyone's got different opinions about life. Do you understand? I believe that, for example, for myself, that I'm better than this life. I'm better than who I am, for example, in some ways. You understand? But the thing is that you have to realize that if you really want to grow, then you have to understand that you have to explain yourself even better to other people so that they understand. But the thing is that if you realize who you are, for example, that you are someone spiritual living in a human body, and that you embody yourself every single day in the present moment and living as much as you can in terms of longevity, in terms of who you are, in terms of who you need to be. For example, every single day you're going to be a better person because you just understand yourself. You understand who you can actually be. Yes, and so you have to understand that when you want to be someone, you try to embody yourself in a way that you're writing as much as you can about everything that you can be. In a sense, so the more you write as much as you want in terms of life, the better you're going to be because you're communicating. You're helping yourself to focus better. You're helping yourself to create something in terms of words or music or design. And that way you have meaning in life, and your meaning is who you are. You understand? But you have to realize that the more words you give, for example, the more words you give, the better you are going to be in terms of life. Yes, and you're just going to have much more smarts. You're going to be much more credible. You're going to be much more of who you want to be, for example. So you have to realize that it's much more about giving weight, yes, and to other people. So for example, there have been people out there who say to me, "Hey Danny, who are you going to teach?" Like in a sarcastic way, but they're not being sarcastic. They're asking me questions. Yes, and they're asking me like, "Danny, who can you teach seriously? You're over your head, Danny. You think that you're a teacher." I mean, they say these kind of things to me, and it just comes off in a way that it's the truth. But the thing is that it's much more how they don't want to, let's say, put me down because of it. But it's like they come off in a way that it's just different. You know, saying it's just different. I mean, it's like for me to come up to you and say, "Hey, oh, who you gonna teach, man?" I mean, and then I start laughing. I mean, seriously. I mean, you're teaching, are you? And it's like I start laughing again. It's like, I mean, does that make me feel any better now that you told me that, for example? I mean, why don't you go online and see it? But you don't make sense. You don't make sense at all, Danny. You understand? You don't make sense about what you say. You understand? But it's not that I don't make sense. I make sense to myself. You understand? It's not like I don't make sense for myself, because if I didn't make sense to myself, I wouldn't speak it. You understand? I try to make common sense as much as possible. You understand? But other people don't understand me. And then the thing is that when you don't understand me, you keep reading, but they don't want to read anymore because they don't understand. You understand? So the thing is that that's not my problem. You understand? That's not my problem. If you don't want to read from me, go read from someone else. You understand? It's just that simple. So I have no problem with that. I realize your thoughts about me is your opinion. You understand? So your opinion of me is none of my business. I don't care about your opinion about me, because millions of people out there is going to have a different opinion about me. You understand? So I don't go about your opinion about me. Do you understand? So you have to realize that I try to stick to my own opinion of myself. You understand? I'm a positive person. I'm a good person. You understand? I'm a kind person. I give as much as I can. I'm generous. That's who I am. You understand? And you realize that, for example, when you say it. So when you say something that you are, that's who you are. Yes, and you are what you say in life. So you have to realize that there have been out there spiritual teachers, for example, saying that you are not your mind, you are not your heart, you're not your body, you're not anything of this world. You understand? This is all spiritual stuff that I'm reading. You understand? And you have to realize that it's all true, for example. And how is it true? Because it just makes sense for me personally. And saying it's just the way I am. And saying that you are not something of this world, that you are something better than this world. You understand? So you have to realize that other people have told me, "Hey, Daniel, when you mention Jesus, for example, that sick people mention Jesus Christ and stuff like that." You understand? I mean, that you have to realize that there are many pastors out there and stuff like that that mention Jesus Christ and stuff like that, and they're trying to teach people basing on Jesus Christ. You understand? You can teach people based on Jesus Christ. About You can teach what Jesus Christ has taught. You understand? So you have to realize that you have to think outside the box. You understand? I've heard from other people, for example, hey, try to always relate Jesus Christ to everything. You understand? Because when you relate Jesus Christ to everything, you think about Jesus Christ even more in terms of life. So the more you think about Jesus Christ in terms of life, the better you are in terms of following Jesus Christ, in terms of faith. Yes, and that's what I've heard. Yes, and that's how I am. Yes, and so you have to realize that it's just what you choose to believe around your life. Yes, it's who you choose to believe about life that becomes your life. Yes, and so it's just the kind of thing that when you hear something, it's either you take it or you don't take it. I mean, everyone has a different opinion about everything. Yes, and it's about what you choose to accept and what you never choose to accept. So some people have told me, hey, Danny, eat meat, eat meat, eat meat, or eat meat just this once, eat meat just this once. I mean, they don't understand how much veganism, like, they don't understand how much veganism means to me. You know what I'm saying? Because they eat meat, they don't care about my needs. You know what I'm saying? They don't care about how much I want to be a vegan. You understand? And they're like, oh, but we're gonna have a barbecue, we're gonna eat meat, and then you have to eat. And then guess what? Then they make me processed meat, for example, in terms of processed soy meat. Soy, like, there's a lot of food out there that's made from soy products. You understand? And it's like, this is not what I chose to eat. You understand? I chose to eat certain specific things that I want to eat in my life. And even if it's canned food, from eating from a can, it doesn't matter. For me, I can eat from a can. It's 5-star food, for example. Yes, and so you have to realize that it's just how other people think. Oh, that dogs eat from cans, for example. Dogs eat from cans. Yes, and I mean that's their thoughts. Yes, and I mean it's like embarrassing for them to eat from a can. Yes, and so you have to realize that that's all critics that are critiquing me about my life and telling me that it's not that way and that that I must do it a different way. Yes, and but then when I don't listen to them and when I say no, I don't want to do that, then they call me arrogant. They call me, for example, they call me ignorant. They call me stubborn. Yes, and because I don't want to listen to them. Yes, and because I want to go my way, because I want to go do things my way, the way I learned how to do it. You understand? So they say that I'm not open to their way of thinking. You understand? But I am open. I am open to their way of thinking, but I just choose to do it my way. You understand? So the thing is that you have to realize that there are tons of people out there that are going to tell you, hey, it's embarrassing to eat from canned food, or that it's embarrassing to say certain things around whatever it is that you say. Yes, and the thing is that you have to realize that you have to consider what they're saying, but try to learn better. Try to learn much more information so that you can guide yourself to a better state of mind. So, for example, there are people out there who, for example, if I ever had kids in life, they're gonna feed them meat, for example. Yes, and because why? I mean, yes, and because they're scared somehow that the kid's gonna be low in nutrients or something like that. You know what I'm saying? And you have to realize that that kid never chose, for example, to eat meat. You know what I'm saying? It was chosen for him. You know what I'm saying? So the thing is that if I chose to, like if I ever had kids and I chose for my son or daughter to eat my kinds of foods that I ate, then it would be unacceptable. Yes, and you have to realize that's like unacceptable to some people for me to choose what my kids can eat, for example. Yes, and so in a way that's not fair. Yes, and it's like I have no control over that. Yes, it's like if I make kids today, it's like I have no control over what they're gonna eat. Yes, and because somehow I'm a father and there is someone else in my life who doesn't accept that, they don't accept it, and that's how it's gonna be. It's like other people are trying to control my life in terms of trying to control what's around me and stuff like that. Yes, and so the thing is that it's not that they're trying to control me. It's just that they're trying to shape something outside of myself, which I have no control over, and they have no control over either. They have no control over it either, but they want control over it. Yes, and so it's just like that's just thinking outside the box. Yes, and you're just talking about it, but that's how it is. Yes, and so you have to realize that it's much more how if your mother doesn't allow you to go and feed your kids what you want, but she wants to feed your kids with what she wants. Yes, and so you don't have kids, obviously, for example. Yes, and so I'm just making an example. Yes, and then you have to realize, and then it's like if you try to feed your kids what you want, it's like a big problem. Yes, it's a big problem because your mother doesn't allow you, but it's your kids. Yes, and so the thing is that there are people out there like that. Yes, and so what do you do? I mean, yes, and so and if you start to feed your kids, then she shouts, your mother shouts her head off at you all the time. And so she shouts at you all the time, but you're living in her house, or you're living somewhere close to her, or whatever's happening. So you have to realize it's just that kind of thing. Yes, and so you have to realize it's like you want to help the world to be much better, and that's what you're trying to do. Yes, and but if you really want to help yourself to do better, then try never to worry, because you might not have kids, you might not, let's say, get a girlfriend in life, you might not have a boyfriend in life. Yes, and so you don't have to worry about that. Yes, and I mean, let everything sort itself out. Yes, and so I mean, there's a thing that says over there, for example, I'll quote, "Let God sort out your life." Yes, and let other people in terms of life do what they want to do. Yes, and let them be the way they want to be. Yes, and let them accept it. Yes, and let them forgive, and try to forgive and accept everything that happens in your life. Yes, and try to just be the way it is. You understand? But that's how I grow. Yes, and I grow through different ways of thinking all the time. And some people never believe in the work I do. Yes, and they don't believe in the work I do. Yes, and they don't believe in my passions. They don't believe in anything I do. And that's their problem. That's not my problem. Yes, and so if you don't believe in my work, if you don't believe in the person I am, then that's your problem. Yes, and because I believe in the person I am, but I need to do better. Yes, and that's it. If you don't believe a word that I say in my life, then you don't have to. I never force you to believe me. You understand? you have your own thoughts. I mean, whatever makes sense to you, take it. You understand? Sometimes when I read books, for example, it doesn't make sense to me at all. For example, Robert Kiyosaki, for example, his books, not his books, his podcasts. I mean, they're talking about financial knowledge and stuff like that. I mean, they talk about like DSP, or like I don't even know these words that they're saying, for example, at all. But somehow I make sense of what they're saying in other terms, in terms of other ways that they speak, in terms of other ways they're speaking about something, and I understand certain things that they're saying, but other things it doesn't even make sense to me. You understand? I just look at what to stay away from. You understand? And there are people out there saying, hey, don't invest in anything out there. There are people out there saying, don't invest in the stock market, don't invest here, don't invest here. You understand? So you have to realize that in the end, it's like investing where you think it's best for you. You understand? So you have to realize that sometimes when I speak out, I realize people around me, it's like they're ashamed of me, for example, for speaking the way I do. You understand? It's like they're embarrassed for me to speak out something. They're not happy with me in terms of what I'm doing in my life. You understand? It's like they want me to do better. You understand? So you have to realize it's just the way it is. But I grew up very spoiled. You understand? I grew up very spoiled in my life. Like, for example, my dad bought me 3 cars, and I fucked up one. I screwed up one car. The other car went, just turned off, and it didn't want to turn on. The other one, I sold it. And for example, my mum bought me flights to Europe multiple times. For example, you have to realize that she bought me a lot of clothes. Yes, and my mum made me food a lot. I mean, she gave me free accommodation. My dad gave me free accommodation. Yes, and so I grew up as a spoiled person. Yes, and I grew up in a way that when I was going through high school, I was getting into drugs. You understand? So that really, really changed my life. You understand? It changed my life in a way that if I didn't turn away from the drugs, I would not have family today. Yes, and I would not be the person I am today. So it's been like 8 years since I touched any kind of illegal drug out there. I went to Amsterdam recently. I didn't smoke weed at all there, because over there it's legal to smoke weed. And I always dreamt of going to Amsterdam, but I never went, except for just recently. And you have to realize that out there, when you do content, for example, you have to realize that people are listening. I mean, someone out there is watching you. You understand? And that's the main thing, that they are watching. You understand? So when they're watching you, you try to give them the most value that you can, and that's it. You understand? And try to forgive as quickly as possible. So you have to realize, back to my life, for example, because you have to realize that when I talk about things, other things come into my mind just to make a conversation, just to move things forward. And that's what I do. Yes, I say things very, very out of the ordinary. Sometimes I make sure that I speak in orderly terms as well. Yes, and as much as I can, I try to make common sense as much as I can. I try to be as healthy as I can, for example. And you have to realize that, for example, when I was doing drugs, for example, I just wasn't the same person I am today. Yes, and I'm not that person anymore. I'm not that person who's so old-fashioned. Yes, I was old-fashioned. Yes, and you have to realize that I wasn't doing anything in terms of, let's say, studying. I wasn't reading books, for example. I was like one of those worst students in high school. Yes, and in terms of grades. Yes, and but I was very handsome. Yes, I was very handsome. I'm still handsome today. But the thing is that I'm much more handsome now than I ever was in terms of spirituality and in terms of who I am. Do you understand? So you have to realize that who I am in terms of life is just positive. I'm positivity. I'm helping myself just grow as a person. I'm not anything other than something that is growing. Do you understand? So I'm trying to be spiritual. Do you understand? So I realized that in my life I have to do better. Yes, and I have to make sure that I'm living my life the best way I can every single day, and I need to study upon things. You understand? But what people do to you is like, it's not what people do to you. It's like, it's more that what people will do, for example, behind your back, is they'll go and watch your YouTube account, and then they'll analyze you, and then they'll make a decision to see if you're, let's say, healthy about what you say, or they will analyze to see whether they need to give you medication, or they will try to analyze your mind. They will try to analyze exactly who you are, for example, because they want to, because it's their job. Yes, and that's what they do. They try to see your life. They try to see communication to see if everything's all right with you in terms of your words. But I have this to say to those people. It's like, it's much more how I have 1,879 videos on YouTube. So you can go through all my information. Yes, and you can go through all my information and really, really see that I'm improving in terms of everything that I'm saying. Yes, and it's much more how, if you really, really read everything that I've done in my life, and that everything that I've given in terms of YouTube account, you realize that I make sense. Most of the time I make sense, in a sense. So it's much more how you have to realize that if you have a nice and beautiful communicational style with people, then people will understand you're healthy. Do you understand? So that's what you have to realize, that it's much more difficult. It's not difficult. It's much more easier to listen to me speak than it is to speak. You understand? So I've kept you engaged right now for 49 minutes of this video. Yes, and that's just basically my skill to be able to do so. It's my skill to be able to engage you in different ways, so that you stay interested in my topic, so that you stay interested about what I'm saying. Do you understand? Because if I started talking like blah, 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 just, you don't even want to listen to me anymore. Do you understand? So I've built a skill where I'm able to talk and talk and talk and talk about different things, and I'm able to keep you engaged because I understand the threshold. I understand exactly what I need to say to get you to spark up intention, to spark up attention for yourself, to be able to be attentive to what I say. Do you understand? So that's a public speaking style. So for example, I went to Toastmasters for 1 year, and I learned how to speak in front of people. I learned how to speak on the streets. For example, I went on the streets, I did busking performances. I did over 200 hours. I did over 300 hours of busking videos on the street. Yes, and so I've learned how to be in front of a crowd, for example. And you have to realize that many people out there are unable to do that. Yes, and they're unable to go out there in front of people and speak because they don't know what to speak about. Yes, and most people don't have a YouTube channel because they don't know what to speak about. They're scared. Yes, and so you have to realize that they fear that kind of thing. Yes, and some people in my life, for example, are old-fashioned. They don't understand how to do those things. Yes, and nor do they have a desire to help other people in terms of how I do help people. Do you understand? So it's much more how they're different. Yes, and I have nothing against them. Yes, and so you have to realize I have nothing against anyone. No, nobody's against me. Yes, and you have to realize that I realize if what doesn't kill you doesn't make, I realize what doesn't make you, I realize, how's it go? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. You know, sense. So you have to realize that's how it is. You know, sense. So if you're living life, live it to the best of your ability every single day. Try to persuade yourself to do better, and that's it.